Tonight, my name is Brittany Allen. I'll just do some quick little MC stuff and then turn it over to the president of the bullpen. Okay, so welcome. After a student researcher, we've got many fun things today. Okay, so for starters, welcome to Helicon West. We're happy to have you all. Helicon West is a live reading series that brings published local writers to read alongside community members in an open, uncensored forum. In order to promote the voice of every community member and democratic ideals, we honor all levels of skill, ability, and craft. In addition to featuring published authors to give the literary arts more exposure in Cache Valley and its surrounding areas, we invite and celebrate aspiring writers from every walk of life to find and share their voices with us. We are committed to the causes of inclusion, accessibility, and representation in our writing communities. I would like to thank our sponsors, the Bear River Heritage Area, the Logan Library, Sugar House Review, the Utah Humanities, the Utah State English Department, the Utah State Inclusion Center, and forever our founder and patron saint, Star Colebrook. All right, so tonight, after the bullpen reads, we will move to the open mic portion of the event. If you have not had a chance to sign up and would like to, it is tucked away up here. Yep, and after our featured readers, we'll go as far down the list as we can before the stroke of 8:30. Each reader will have up to 7 minutes of time to read for us, and after 7 minutes, they will be politely clapped off. All of our Helicon West events are recorded and then later posted to our Helicon West YouTube channel. If you would not like to be recorded, whether you're on the bullpen team or you want to read during the open mic, just, swat at us, let us know, and we will pause it for you. Okay, yeah, as I said before, Helicon West is made possible by our generous sponsors and the community we serve. To help us stay in person until the new Logan Library is built and keep the coffee coming, there's a couple ways you can make a donation. You can scan our QR code if you've got PayPal, and you can leave your pocket change in the collection can up by the open mic sign-up sheet. Just help us keep bringing free literary community events. If something moves you, if the coffee revives you, if your date was free tonight, consider leaving a tip, right? And, okay, so that's about it from me. Before we jump into our featured readers tonight, we have a student researcher from the English department, Virginia Beichman, who is hoping to get some English major participants for a study of hers. So,
all right, Virginia. Yes. I have some handouts of essentially the information I'm going to go over. There are 24. Okay. But I have handouts, so if you want to spread those around. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Virginia Beichman. I am a student in English 3470, a QI course up here at the college. And I am doing a research project into fan fiction and content-seeking choices in fan fiction readers here at USU for that class. I am looking for English majors who are over 18 who have been reading fan fiction for over a year to participate in an approximately 30-minute interview to collect information for the research. If you choose to participate, you will be asked about your experiences as a fan fiction reader. Your participation, and the interview is anonymous, and no identifying information is collected. I will share with you a letter of information in the interview. If you wish to stop at any point during the interview, you may without penalty. This research follows standards set by USU's International Review Board and is overseen by Dr. Kincaid. Her contact information can be found on the handout. If you are interested in participating or have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email me at the email on the handout. It is very long, I'm sorry. For those of you interested in the interview, please email me with 2 to 3 days and times that will work for your schedule for the interview to my email noted on the handout. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, so if you are, and is it English majors only? Okay, so if you're a student up here, English majors only, a big fan fiction fan, go ahead, help Virginia out. No matter who you are, help us out, sign up on the open mic list. And without further ado, I will turn it over to the bullpen president, Amrutha.
This is so exciting! Good afternoon. Thank you for introducing and inviting us. A little blurb about the bullpen. We are a creative writing club here on campus. We meet every Monday at 3:30 p.m. in Gravy West 214, which is that way, I think. We would love it if you joined us. With that being said, I think I'm going to invite our first speaker onto the stage. Hi. Yay, first speaker. My name's Amrutha. It's nice to meet you. I'm sure you haven't heard of me. I am the president of Bullpen, and today, I forgot my rights. And today I will not only be the MC for this sort of session, but I will also be reciting an original nonfiction piece published in the Utah State St. Call magazine in 2020. The work is titled The Best Shade of Brown. The Best Shade of Brown. We called him Nick. He plopped down next to me every day in 2011 in Latin class, taught by Mr. Broad. As his name alluded, he appeared very broad. He dressed in a wrinkled gray button-down shirt, tucked into black slacks with a Coke in one hand and his glasses in the other. Each of his steps echoed in the auditorium. A class of 25 scrawny Indian students. Everyone resembled a different shade of brown. Some of us darker than others, burnt like charcoal from the Arizona heat beating down our backs. The others light as sand on California beaches. However, we differed more than color. The lighter students sat on the fake rubbery grass, chomped their sandwiches, cackled with their mouths open, and apologized for the food raining out of their mouths. Darker kids squished into one bench directly behind the pillar, blocking their wide eyes from the scorching rays. Though made for seating of four, they managed to squeeze in 8, thighs rubbing against each other. Their nails gleamed and their teeth sparkled like pearls. Last but not least, my friends and I. A mix of colors, plopped ourselves on a table outside where the shade sliced through the middle, some of us squinting, strong, spicy food, wide smiles, and laughing like gaping seals. The lucky dark-colored ones sprawled in the shade, their armpits drier than ours, but their laughs equally as loud. At first, I tried to be Nick's friend. I greeted him with a smile and a wave every class period, but the hospitality quickly died out as my frustrations with his lack of reciprocation skyrocketed. Sometime during the second semester of 5th grade, I stared at my empty paper as the room filled with shuffling tennis shoes, sweaty boys, and squeaky giggles. My fingers twirled my pencil idly as I desperately wanted the class to start. The quicker class started, the quicker I could go home. He landed with a thud in his seat, tapped on my left shoulder. I rolled my head towards him, still fiddling with my pencil. I raised my eyebrow, and he leaned in. His breath smelled like stale mint gum as his chapped lips lightly grazed my ear. "Why are your arms so hairy?" he whispered. I instinctively covered my arms. My eyes widened like saucers, and I shrunk back in my seat, far away from him like a slug rolling in salt. Making sure no one else heard him, my head whipped from side to side, each turn sending my braid whacking my back. I glanced at his arms, noticing his arm hair not nearly as much as mine. Also, why are you so dark? No response. I wore a jacket to cover my hairy arms and dark skin every day, no matter the temperature. And trust me, it got a little hot during the summers in Arizona. Yeah, I still wondered how many others bottled the same question, but were too cowardly to ask. I dreaded AP biology in 8th grade. The workload I balanced fine with dance practice and violin class, but the subject itself embodied hell. Black posters on either side of the door displayed "Wear Black on Friday" in white italics to raise awareness for Suicide Prevention Week. I rolled my eyes at them, disappointed. The posters were hung just yesterday morning, and today was National Suicide Prevention Day. I wore black leggings and a black t-shirt matching the other 3 girls in my class. We looked through microscopes for our lab, trying to identify different structures in plant and animal cells. My partners and I rotated on who looked into the microscope, one for each station. A nun started. She shoved her pink-rimmed glasses in my hand and peered into the microscope, announcing her discovery of the Golgi body, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and the mitochondria. My turn came quicker than expected. People around us shuffled slowly to their respective stations. I noticed a group in the back of the class staring at me. I turned around, ducking my head, trying to hide my face with a curtain of hair. Ananya leaned towards me and put her arms around my waist as if she was hugging me. She squeezed and stood on her tippy toes as I stood nearly 4 inches taller than her. I think I know what they're calling you. She nodded her head towards the kids in the back of our class. She was referring to what their code name was for me. I looked at her through my hair, seeing bits and pieces of her porcelain skin and scrunched eyebrows. Her brown eyes softened and glistened with pity. What? I watched her lips move but heard no sound. I leaned in closer so I could feel her warm breath fanning the side of my hair. Black death. Tears pooled in my eyes, but I blinked them away before anyone noticed. Because I'm dark? No, I'm sure it's what you're wearing. But we both know it wasn't true. I sat cross-legged in my dorm, my gray joggers loose around my thighs, tightened and cinched around my ankles. A bowl of Maggi, Indian ramen, sat in my lap, and my phone lay propped up against my pillow. I giggled as my phone screen split into 4 different sections. The top left contained my sister also slurping a bowl of Maggi. It wasn't a coincidence. We called each other earlier that day and agreed to eat the same dinner. The top right held a little rectangle with me, my hair in a bun, and my fork dangling from my mouth. The bottom left consisted of my mom, her face too close to the camera. Her smile stretched so wide her lips looked like they hurt. She visited India for her in-laws, helping my grandmother since she underwent hip surgery. Who squinted behind her, trying to look through the phone without crying. In the bottom right lay my dad. He sprawled on the sofa, his legs stretched out to his left, covered in green fleece. My mom spoke first. Why are you still so dark? Her words left marks everywhere. They bounced off the walls. Though taken aback, I kept a smile pasted on my face. I heard this question enough to know better not to answer or to try. Aren't you wearing pawns every day? Her eyebrows raised, and my grandmother scooted closer to the camera, gaining sudden interest and staring at me with wrinkled raisin eyes. Pawns is a company manufacturing a whitening cream and powder that I have applied every day since 5th grade. It is quite literally a lightening cream designed to reduce melanin in the skin with each application. Yes, I am, I respond. Then why are you still so dark? And I don't have an answer, and I don't think I ever will. I grew accustomed to wanting to be white, wanting to scrub my skin until it bled, wanting to scrub the dirt, thinking that's what made my skin brown, wanting to see my face grow a lighter shade in the cold winters of Utah, and wanting to be someone beautiful. Because where I come from, brown isn't beautiful. Thank you. Alter ego, I'm back. Next, we will be hearing from the Vice President, Ethan Chadwick, who is updating us on the MSB pandemic. There will be a time for questions after the briefing. Please hold your applause until the end. Also, let the record state today's date, Sunday, April 2nd of the year 2023.
Hello and greetings to my fellow Americans and our allies. I just finished a meeting with the National Pandemic Response Task Force. Many of its members are here with me today, and I'd like to thank them and the CDC for their incredible work so far. This meeting will consist of a series of presentations on the status of the new pandemic that has surfaced in the last few months. As some of you may know, this statement was originally meant to be a press release, but with some new information we've recently been made aware of, the President has asked me to hold this briefing instead. After I give a summarized update on the MSB virus, I will turn the time over to Dr. Caroline Souza for a closer look at some of the information given here. After her presentation, Press Secretary Karen Cabrera will be given time to answer your questions. Thank you all for coming. As we have worked to consolidate and share data with nations across the world, the task force has discovered some general statistics concerning the MSB virus. But I will first start by sharing some information our friends in Scotland have discovered. Due to its evolution from the Epstein-Barr virus, the MSB virus has a high infection rate among the world population. As of 10 days ago, MSB was considered to simply be an immunocompromising virus that allowed underlying conditions and other illnesses to have a greater effect in the human body. Unfortunately, a new strain of the virus has appeared here in the eastern United States, which has more severe symptoms and may lead to or prevent neurofunctions. This new strain is, of course, only initially dangerous to the approximate 10% of the population that are afflicted with symptoms, though the asymptomatic carriers who make up the other 90% should take great caution as well. The United States government has taken into custody an individual acting as a carrier of the new MSB strain. This individual, who wishes to be referred to as JML, appears to possess a rare combination of genetic material that allows them to infect those who are otherwise immune and or carriers of the original strain, putting those in contact with JML at risk for the life-threatening infection of the new strain. This genetic material is being referred to as the juggernaut gene. This individual has gone under voluntary isolation and is fully cooperating with various government organizations to research this incredibly sensitive situation. The President wished for JML and their situation to be made public to emphasize to his fellow Americans that it is imperative to report any symptoms matching with MSB, especially if you have not been affected by it yet. The National Pandemic Response Task Force, CDC, and many other organizations are working around the clock to ensure the safety of the public. For clarification, JML is the only individual who possesses the juggernaut gene due to an extreme rarity in their DNA. They represent an incredibly tiny portion of the already small percentage of the American population affected by MSB. About 10% of the population, 35 million individuals, can be infected with the new strain of MSB. Of that percentage, approximately 20,000 individuals act as carriers for the new strain. JML is a 0.00005% of that new group of carriers. In other words, there are approximately 15 individuals with the juggernaut gene worldwide. According to the estimates made by the CDC, JML is the only individual with it in all of North America. Therefore, Americans nationwide should be assured that the government has already contained the risk associated with the juggernaut gene. I'll let Dr. Souza take over now to go into detail on the symptoms of the new strain of MSB, as well as the general pandemic regulations that will be implemented in the coming months. I ask that you give her your undivided attention. Thank you.
I'm not Dr. Souza, but we are not taking any further questions for the Vice President. Now, I would like to introduce Cami Bassett, who is majoring in global communications with a language emphasis in Arabic. Her piece is the first few pages of the new book that she's working on, which is a young adult mystery called Harley Bates and the Marquis of Castle Murdoch.
All right, Harley Bates and the Marquis of Castle Murdoch. 1. Harley Bates, professional exorcist, walked up the steps of 225 Rutherford, enduring leaves swirling around his boots. Dead leaves, so there was a chance he was dealing with a corn creeper. The button-eyed buggers loved to hop off their posts and wrestle around in the countryside, trailing blood and straw through people's crops. They were rarer in the metallic tang of city air, but you never knew. Bates scraped muddy boots on the mats, or maybe a howler. Anywhere the wind whistled, a howler wasn't far behind. With their inverted jaws and wicked claws, those were always exciting. But then, every moment was exciting. When you'd been in this field as long as Bates, you'd seen it all. Yet, it never got old. Just like me. Bates smiled to himself and rang the bell. A flustered woman, hands full of worry and trepidation, answered. Oh, thank God, you're here. Bates didn't mention he wasn't religious. He'd sold his soul to the demon Mephistopheles several hundred years ago. Never once regretted that. He shrugged. The woman didn't have any one of several lingering staff members take his coat, but that was fine with Bates. Green was his signature color. Best not to part from your signature. That, and being waited upon by anyone, made his skin crawl. With a brisk nod, the woman led him up the grand staircase to a little bedroom. Inside the little bedroom sat a little girl with lily black hair and a content smile. She was talking to a demon. She was talking his pointy bat-like ears off. "It's been a while," said Bates to the demon, and the girl's mother jumped. Mothers often couldn't see demons, and they were often jumpy. Mephistopheles pressed talon hands over his ears, then wrapped waxy wings over his face. Muffled through the membrane, he said, "I will give you anything." The girl was chattering on about maths. "Your soul?" asked Bates, eyebrow raised. "Whose soul?" the jumping mother asked. "Whose soul?" "If I had one," mumbled Mephistopheles. Dropping his wings, he nodded his head like a galloping rocking horse, as if to bang it on the backrest of the chair he was perched upon. The girl's chair. She was practicing her times tables. He loomed behind her, gangly on the backrest that should have been much too small to hold him, yet graceful in his perfected art of balance. According to the dark law, now that he had attached to her shadow, he couldn't leave her presence until she sold him her soul or dismissed him. "I will rip you to shreds," he whispered in her ear, tongue flicking. "I will feast upon your bleeding heart." The little girl lifted her head and laughed. "Oh, bless your heart, Mephistopheles," she said. "Have you had anything to eat?" She began practicing her pianoforte on her lap, humming the notes for him. The demon waved his talons. See? "No, I've not had anything to eat." Leaping from the chair, he dangled from the ceiling, wings crossed. "I haven't feasted on a soul in 700 years. Bates chuckled. "You are enjoying this, I see, Bates," Mephis said, jaws snapping. The exorcist shrugged. The demon dragged a taloned hand down his face, or rather up, since he was upside down. The girl was singing now, bright and ever so slightly off-key. "Harley, I am begging you. What do you want? Your soul? I'll spit it back out and blasphemous hell no," said Bates. "Anything, my friend, but that." The mother choked on her hurry up. Bates winced. Seeing Mephistopheles again for the first time in 78 years, he'd forgotten she was there. "I swear, sometimes humans are as invisible to me as demons are to them." Madam." The mother squinted at him. Her black hair was pinned up under her autumn bonnet, and she wore a yellow and blue plaid polonaise. Dreadful shape for a dress, if you asked Bates. She smoothed her feet and twisted together gloved hands. "And in the name of God, I could not have only just heard you refer to that hideous shadow as your friend." "Such manners," said Mephistopheles. Hanging from one hand on the rafter, he righted himself, then dropped to a hunched crouch on the floor. "Would our gentleman be more appropriate?" asked Bates. "Nemesis?" The mother stared. "I'll bite your head off, Harley," dragging his talon for all to hear. "Like a nail on cold glass. Don't you dare slightly. Again." "It really is very nice," said the little girl, reaching around to pat Mephistopheles' shoulder since the top of his talon was too far away. "Elizabeth Margaret Murdoch!" The mother put it out, shrieked a howler. "Don't you touch that creature!" Her gaze had followed her daughter's hand to what she perceived as the empty space above the shadow. Sure, judge someone by their shadow, when it's elongated on the floor with sinister thinness and dripping with blood-red backlighting. "That," decided the mother, staring at it. "Monster." Mephistopheles swiveled his head to glare. He had 3 sets of horns, sharp nubs, malefic sprouts, and spirals that curled around by his ears, tangled between the red golden curls of a fallen angel. He had marbled ash gold skin to match and green serpent eyes. Other than that, and the elfish ears and the wings, and the talons, and the forked tongue, he was essentially just human. Mephis burned a far bloodier glare at Bates, guessing at the exorcist's thoughts. Nothing offended a demon like calling him human, particularly Mephistopheles. Bates pushed up his glasses. "Madam," he said, still matching Mephistopheles' stare. "I assure you." "You assure me?" The woman turned on him. "I will be assured, Mr. Bates, when you send that thing back to the hell it crawled from." Harley's jaw locked so hard the muscle in it jumped. The little girl stood from her chair. "Mother, that is not polite," she said. "Not polite at all." "A demon," the mother said, "is hardly polite society." She smoothed her skirts. "Mr. Bates, sir." "Pardon?" "Sir Harley Bates." If they were keeping track of titles, Bates had been knighted by the occasional grateful monarch here and there. "Mr. Bates, can you rid my home of that beast or not?" "Yes," said Bates, tugging on his coat. "Little girl, you must say these exact words. Fiend of hell, I dismiss Lilibet." "Yes, we all have names we prefer and terms we don't," said Bates, running his fingers through his hair. "Now please say the words, Fiend of hell, I dismiss you," Lilibet said to the exorcist. "Mephistopheles is my friend." She sniffed, sat, and bounced her fingers on crisp imaginary keys. "If you were a very good friend, you'd say he was yours too."
I think I can speak for everybody when I say will be Michael Skillings. He will be reading an excerpt from an original fantasy work in progress that will debut as the video game Forbearance Zero in 2022.
Barge explodes out the seat next to me. His voice echoes against the high vaulted ceiling of the council chamber. What? I feel every single eye in the chamber snap onto us. I cover my face with my hands. Seated on a dais above the audience are the 5 destinators, dressed in the traditional robes and coats of their title. The chief destinator's eyes narrow in annoyance. For the major's benefit, we will repeat our decision, he says with an edge in his voice. We, the Council of Destinators, assign the candidate Sheen Kaur to the role of combat mage in the 31st Outworld Expeditionary Army. She will be granted the rank of cadet, and upon completion of her training, she will be granted the rank of 2nd lieutenant. She is to begin her training for this role immediately. The Destinator looks up from his paper and glares down at Barge. Now, if there are no further disturbances, we will continue. But Your Honor, there must be some mistake, Barge exclaims. I specifically wrote in my recommendation that she be assigned to the thaumatorium. Surely her talents can be better used here than bleeding out on some remote rock. My face is hot and red. Why won't he sit down? Why is he embarrassing himself like this? Why is he embarrassing me like this? We read your recommendation, Major, says the Destinator. However, we came to a different conclusion than you did. Please do not confuse our disagreement with personal insult. Personal insult? A damn stupid decision is what it is. Look, I've worked with Kaur. I know her talents. I know how she can best. Major Luen Barge, you will not question the judgment of the council, and you will not disturb these proceedings again. Barge and the chief destinator stare at each other across the council chamber. I hear Barge's teeth grinding together. After a long, few tense seconds, Barge says, "Yes, Your Honor." A thin veneer of bitter formality barely hides his sarcasm. He slowly returns to his seat. The chief destinator continues, a bit of the edge gone from his voice. We can see you think highly of your pupil, Major. Such is to be commended. But the council's distance allows us to evaluate matters more objectively than you can. The cadet's aptitude for thaumaturgy is impressive, but there is the unavoidable matter of her caste. It would reflect poorly on the thaumatorium to accept one of such low birth directly from the academy. This is the purpose of her assignment. Combat will give her an opportunity to prove herself worthy to rise above her birth. If she does so, she will be considered for the thaumatorium. They're talking about me as if I'm not here. The chief destinator moves on with the ceremony. The other candidates are assigned roles. Some are assigned to the war, like me. Some are assigned to the thaumatorium. A few are assigned to unspecified, specialized roles. When the ceremony concludes, we leave the council chamber. I almost have to run to keep up with Varga's angry stride. Why did you do that? I whisper. What? Varga turns his head. Why did you do that? Do what? Contradicts the council like that. It was embarrassing. Varga stops and spins around to face me. I almost run into him. Embarrassing? Sheen, listen to me. This is important. You never have to be embarrassed about anything, but especially not about standing up for yourself. You're a brilliant mage, Sheen. The destinators can't see that, but I can, and I don't ever want you to forget that. He places a hand on my shoulder. His tone softens. I know you don't belong in the Outworlds, but I know you'll do great there. I'll still be here when you get back, so just make sure you make it back in one piece, all right? I nod my head. I'll do my best. No, you will make it back. You're brilliant, remember? All right, I say after a pause. I will make it back. Barge smiles. Good. That's what I like to hear.
I don't like fantasy, but I like that. Next, we have Tara Paranto, who is a senior and English major who will be reading an original piece titled Ode to a Rubber Duck, which featured as a published work in the St. Hollow Literary Journal.
Ode to the Rubber Duck. A small rubber duck floats on the surface of the pond in the greenhouse as my mother coaxes life into the old sunflowers and the new arugula, pouring water on their heads. And as the pump in the pond moves water, the duck gets too close and the gentle stream is too much for him. Just a tap on his head from the water pouring in and he is floating upside down, as good as a dead duck. But I am here and I pick up his body and I move him away from the stream pouring in and I put him right side up. And he is as good as alive again. Sometimes some water on the head is a new start.
I love that, thank you. Now we have Jay Payne, who is a poetry editor for St. Hollow. Lately, he has been interested in astronomy and ekphrasis. Yes. So he tries to combine the two in his new poem, High Res.
High Res, after Tycho's supernova as photographed in the X-ray light by the Chandra X-ray Observatory. How wide did Tycho's pupils dilate on that early November night of 1572 when that new fixture pinned itself to the firmament? Did he gasp, knowing that fixture proved our celestial realm capable of change, not unlike humans, many of whom give birth before surrendering their material bodies to entropy? Did his blonde mustache curl upward as he smiled, knowing that fixture shone in opposition to Aristotle's belief that our realm of stars is unchanging and eternal in its disposition? Tycho did, after all, claim that star shone brighter than Venus, despite it appearing to have been no more than an infant star newly ripped from the Milky Way's womb. But the star didn't retain its brightness. By 1574, its luminosity waned, vanished, but not before Tycho made it the subject of his astronomical work, De Nova et Nullius Aevi Memoria Prius Visa Stella, roughly concerning the star, new and never before seen in the life or memory of anyone. So perhaps those before Tycho were deprived of witnessing a birth, those after a death. Centuries later, an observatory orbits Earth and angles its four nested mirrors towards the star's scattered remains. Its aperture dilates, and an X-ray image is produced concerning the remnant, new and never before seen in the life or memory of anyone. I study this image, plumes of high-res spectra curling green, yellow, red, and with my index finger I trace the impression of the supernova's violet halo, realizing somewhere in our galaxy all that radiation ripples across dark fabric as it surrenders particles to entropy. And to think Tycho was unable to study the contours of its death, unable to recognize that fixture was no more than an ancient star exploding into unimaginable quantities of pure celestial light. But he almost had it right. For what was its death but a birth, a new angel born luminous before dissolving into darkness?
The vibes were all there. I support it. Last but not least, we have Darren Fott, who has requested a bit of anonymity, and I'm only saying this because I only have a sentence written down, and I don't want you guys to be like, you don't like Darren, you only said a sentence. No. He requested it. Nonetheless, this is the sentence I have. He will be reciting an original piece titled Seeing Color. See, it's not that much.
I first heard yellow in the way you laughed, a sound like the ringing of golden chimes as they played in a gentle breeze. The cheerful yellow was a bright contrast to the colorless shades of gray I was used to. It was something new, something different, something that I wanted to hear again. It took me a while to gather the nerve, but I finally mustered the courage to talk to you. I could hear the smile in your voice even before you said a word. Your hand was as warm as a summer day as you slid it into mine and pulled me close. I'm Ellie, you said, and I'm Lucas. I remember being surprised that you didn't care that gray was all that I knew. It didn't matter. You just squeezed my hand and told me, I can change that. And you did. It was you who introduced me to color. You started with yellow. Yellow, the color of the sun on my face and the smell of your favorite flowers on the walk home. Yellow, the way the butter on your mother's homemade bread dissolved in my mouth, flavors bursting with every bite. Yellow, the sound of your laugh as it painted the air and filled me with warmth. Yellow, the color that brought a brightness to the world around you. And you saw color in everything. That first summer, you took me to a place where blue was the smell of salt in the air and purple was the taste of the sticky popsicles that dripped down our chins. I smiled as you tried to describe the indescribable colors of the sunset reflecting on endless water as we stood barefoot in the sand that you said had a color all of its own. The first fall we spent together, brown was the sound of crunching leaves and the rough bark of the maple trees on the walks through the canyon. Orange was the handfuls of slimy pumpkin guts and the taste of candy corn, while amber was the smell of your dad's famous apple cider and its honey-sweet taste as it slid down my throat. Our first winter, green was the smell of the Christmas tree, and white was the taste of the snowflakes we caught on our tongues. Burgundy was the soft wool between my arms as you hugged me tight in the new sweater I gave to you, and red was the warmth in my chest that you told me was the feeling of home. When I was with you, I didn't feel blind. I felt like I could truly see. Gold, the jeweler told me, was the color of my undying love, and I knew it was the right choice when you threw your arms around me. Blue was the gentle lapping of the ocean waves and the texture of the scratchy suit I wore because you insisted it matched my eyes. Yellow was the smell of the sunflowers and the shifting of my nervous feet. White was the way your lace dress felt as it brushed my hand and the hush of the crowd as you said those soft words, I do. Pink was the taste of your lips against mine. It wasn't long until I learned that pink was also the color of the cries of our little girl, the silky smooth of the satin bow in her hair, and the way I held her against my chest. We named her Madeline, a name that reminded you of the colors of your childhood and reminded me of the first time I met you. Lavender was the smell of the first place our family called home, the place where Madeline grew so big she could barely fit in my arms. It was there that we learned that blue was the taste of the berries she loved to eat, and rainbow was the color of the stories she told. Yellow was the way she held our hands as we waited for the school bus, and the way she hugged us once she got home. Green was the smell of her hands on the days she spent playing in the garden, and we could hear it on those quiet nights if we listened carefully to the way the wind blew through the trees. They were days filled with color, days I thought would last forever, days that I didn't want to end. But, like every day, the sun must eventually set. I still remember that night. We left Madeline at your parents' and had gone for a drive. You rolled down the windows and turned off the radio so that I could hear the purple sound of crickets as they sang their melancholy tune. It was the first time we had been alone together in months. We talked and laughed, the sounds of yellow that I had come to love. It was then that your laugh was cut short. I didn't need you to tell me that burnt orange was the screech of car tires or that chrome was the crunching metal and shattering glass as we were hit head-on. I didn't need you to tell me that black was the smell of the burning oil or that white was the color of the shaky voice of the paramedic who told me everything was going to be okay. You weren't there to tell me about red. Red, the smell of blood that filled the operating room, the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears when the doctors told me that they had done everything they could, the coppery taste in my mouth that mixed together with my tears as I screamed your name, the way I clutched your hand, refusing to let go. And then you were gone. I was there for hours, begging and pleading for you to come back, that you wouldn't leave me alone. There was so much life left to live, so many colors that I didn't understand. But when you left, the colors left with you. I spent endless hours thinking of you and the colors that we had shared lying there on that cold hospital bed. At first, I tried to hold on, but it was too painful. The bright yellow dreams we shared gradually turned sour as the memories of color faded to a dull gray. Gray was the gritty taste in my mouth as I quietly explained to little Madeline that Mommy wasn't coming home. It was the way my stomach sank when I realized I would be taking care of our little girl on my own. Gray was how I felt when I was asked how I was doing, and gray was my only answer. You were gone, and I was alone. I spent the next several days trying to dull the painful burning of our memories and tried to forget. I tried to let the colors dissolve like smoke between my fingers, but I couldn't. I couldn't let go. As time went on, it felt like no one around seemed to notice, no one seemed to care, and so I ignored the building pain in my chest as it became more and more difficult to bear, and everything grew darker and darker. It wasn't until then that I realized black was a different color than gray. Black, each day I would be without your laugh. Black, the cold smell of nights without you. Black, the taste of my muffled sobs as my soul screamed in a way that only I could hear. Black, the sharp edges of my shattered world. Black, how it felt to truly be blind. That night, I put Madeline to bed early and stood by the door, listening to her quiet breathing. I knew that she would miss me, but she deserved to be happy. She deserved a world full of color, a world that I couldn't give her. I sat on my bed, trying one last time to remember the colors that you had once shown me, the colors I'd once been able to feel. But it was no use. Black was the only color that I could see. I took one last breath and froze when I felt a small hand slip into my own. It was then that I could hear the yellow of your voice as Madeline hugged me and whispered, "Daddy, it's going to be okay."
That was so sad. But that was great, and I appreciate it. I would like to say thank you again for Helicon West for inviting Bullpen, and shout out to all of the excellent readers that are part of the club. I'm very proud of you all, and we really appreciate all of you coming. I will now retire the privilege and power of the holder of this podium back to its rightful owner.
No, this podium was here when I got here. Thank you, Bullpen. Let's give them just one more. Okay. If you intend to sign up for the open mic list, you want to give me a wave? Okay. If you change your mind, it'll be right up here. You can sneak around. In fact, you know what? I'll go sit down with it over there so you can sneak that way if it's better, okay? But our first three open mic readers tonight will be Asher Blakely, Ronald Jensen, and Steve Shumway.
Sacrifice. My grandmother died in the same room her mother died in. The same room one day my mother will die in. The far back bedroom of the house at the bend in the road, the smallest room with the matched highboy vanity and queen-sized bed. Her books lining the shelves mounted to the wall, biographies and Bible study. Beloved like the carved jewelry boxes carefully filled with her mother's cameo, her grandmother's gold-chained pocket watch. I wonder if my mother has packed away the remnants of her mother's life, or just carefully filled in the blank spaces with her own treasures. The carved ivory bear my stepdad once wore around his neck, the dream catcher wolf howling at its center, the cardboard box with her silver and pearl Kokopelli bracelet and sapphire wedding set. In another life, I too lived trapped in that house, my own treasures displayed haphazard between the remnants of another person's life, my letters pinned to the wall, theater, orchestra, choir, marching band, my books beside the radio on the floor, CDs and cassettes tucked away in the closet. I escaped, made a life for myself and my family far away from their grabby fingers that only value the things they take. Yet I know the day will come when my mother's fragile health finally fails, when I, as the only female-born child, will be called to return to that place so that I may be the one to nurse her out of this mortal skin. And then I have one more, if I can open it. One of the boys. I ran with the boys in high school, biked around town like we were hot shit, played Magic the Gathering and D&D while binging on Taco Bell and shotgunning Mountain Dew. I was jealous of thick shoulders and unshaved legs. I envied their freedom to change their bodies, shaggy hair in wild colors, tattoos on forearms and calves, pierced noses, tongues, and nipples. Amy, my grandmother tipped. They'll never be hired looking like criminals. I wore my jeans loose and my shirts too big, afraid of my own flesh. I wanted checkered canvas Vans only available in the boy aisle and ball caps too crass for a young lady. Stewing in my skin, unable to express how my body had failed me, I'd never heard the word trans. And that moment where it all coalesced, Andrew said, "I'm gay." And Tara's casual reply, "So Amy can teach you to suck dick and you can teach her to wear a dress like a real girl." I still carry the sound of their laughter in my ears.
Hi. Coming up, the best year yet. The first year, 50, I started going out with Kelly. Started a great decade, if you know what I mean. Now, the last year, I just stuck it on my mind. I'm only a decade in it. Just how do I? Hope to make it. The best year yet. With my wife Kelly and how's Matt. Big thing from before I start speaking, and then what about not forget what started out 400 years ago, the pilgrims sailed the seas to a land, let you be free. Truth of God as they please. The next they chose won't be one to read. The beginning of chapter, they get through the first year, and now we can celebrate the those of old days. Every year and a day, collect age of mine, not up together, that's so fine. I'm glad that we can be connected in that way. I'm glad that we set that, and listen every day.
Cedar tree. Blanched branches reach outward to grasp at each dirty raindrop that falls from the gray desert sky. But lacking the leaves to catch them, the water splashes against the petrifying remains of this once living thing, dripping down, turning shale to dirt and dirt to mud, not knowing it has come too late. And then this other one called Impression Sunrise. In a ditch, I find a dove looking lifelessly upward at nothing. Its single eye is red and scabbed, and its feathers are stained the color of old snow. I look to the sky, and the dead bird's eye is the sun, bloodshot. The clouds are grayed down, and dawn becomes a dove resurrected.
Thank you all. Okay, any other changes of heart?
Okay.
Yeah? Oh, no, your turn. You can sit down.
I'll do it.
Zach, do you have a last name?
My last name is Zachary. I have two first names, if that's...
That was too good.
Okay, perfect. So our last three readers then will be Zachary, Virginia, and Shannon Bellum.
Sorry. She got me with that eyebrow. Cool. So I wrote a horror story recently. For Poem in the Dark. Yeah, and I figured I would read it out loud if I can find it. Particularly because Millie helped me write it, and so I want her to hear it. Yeah. Sorry, it's loading. Cool. Jessica sat under the fluorescent buzz of ceiling lights. Buzzing, depression-made material. She could hear the wall clock ticking and small chips of her life falling away. How long has she been here? She picked up at the clock, then over to Cameron's office. She spent 3 hours of her Saturday alone among empty cubicles in a dull office. Where was he? He had acted like giving Jessica her own set of keys was a milestone in her career, and she jumped on the bait. And now the trap had sprung. She was here. She jumped up, deciding to grab one of the free cans of soda in the break room. Her corporate ploy to keep employees from asking for better benefits, and maybe Saturdays off. Somehow it worked. As she glided over the gray square carpet towards the break room, she frowned at the closed blinds of Cameron's office that partitioned him away from the commoners in their cubicles. Fucking dickhead. Maybe he didn't deserve that. He was a normal guy who did a normal amount of work, which was too much, wore a lot of polos, maybe some K-Swiss shoes every often. God, the way he compensated for her sex. Hey guys, and lady, he would always say at every meeting, singling her out the more he tried not to be sexist, never forgetting to point out that there was in fact a woman in the same room. As she cracked a can of Coke, she hoped nothing bad had happened to him. The metal of his car crunched like a beer can on the highway, or his fed-up wife throwing shovelfuls of dirt on top of his lifeless body in the yard. She thought about telling someone he was missing. It wasn't like him to be this late. Suddenly, she heard a cawing of a crow. That's strange. She stepped out of the break room and listened. Had that come from inside? She moved towards Cameron's corner office. The sound had seemed to come from behind the closed blinds. Maybe he'd left a window open in there? Maybe she'd imagined it. She paused. Then it sounded again, definitely coming from the office. Could she call facilities? Or maybe animal control? She stepped towards the door, and as she reached for the knob, her eyes caught sudden movement. The blinds creased open, but the light inside Cameron's office was off. She couldn't see who was looking out, but someone was looking at her. She swung her hand away from the door, and the blinds snapped shut. She felt her pulse speed up, panic stretching her veins, and she ran back to the break room and emerged with a broom. She walked over and stood in front of the door, watching the blinds before she reached for the handle. She took a deep breath, realizing how jittery she felt, tried to calm her nerves. Cameron hadn't shown up. She'd unlocked the front door herself, and he was playing a trick on, or maybe he was playing a trick on her. Or there was a bird inside the office. There wasn't a man inside the office. She turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was pitch black. No light seemed to leak through the window to the outside or to the main office of cubicles. She flipped the switch. The room lit up. Cameron sat at the desk. His back curved, rounded unnaturally forward over his desk. His head pointed straight forward with his eyes closed. "Cameron," she yelled and lowered her broom. "Are you okay? You scared the hell out of me." He silently opened and closed his mouth, then let out a caw. It sounded like a crow was inside of him. What the fuck, Cameron? How are you doing that?" she screamed. He turned his head toward her and opened his eyes, like holes to white abyss without pupil or vein, then continued to cough, and caw, and caw, and caw, and the caw turned into a rough cough which grew into a fit. Then blood started to drip from his open mouth onto his desk. Then his head careened back and his mouth opened wide and then wider and then wider. So wide, with a crunch and a pop, it dislocated his jaw. His neck grossly stretched, and then a black beak slowly came from his open mouth. He heaved forward, letting out a vomiting cough, and a black crow came completely from his loose lips and hopped casually out of the way as his head hit the desk and he slid off the chair onto the ground. Jessica stood in a paralysis like a waking night terror. Cameron remained on the ground on his side without moving. She stared at the bird, oil black feather that gasped, The crow hopped through the puddle of blood to the edge of the desk and peered up at her. The bird looked up and flew towards the wall, hit the light switch with a quick foot, and flew out into the rows of cubicles, the door swinging shut behind it, and she was left in pitch darkness inside the office with the unconscious man. She stepped with outstretched arms towards the door, but she never reached it. The door had vanished. She walked forward into the black space, feeling helpless in the nothing, and she began to panic, and she began to run. Out of breath, she finally bent her knees. She reached a hand down, but could barely see it. She felt around. The carpet felt like cool, wet grass. She stood up, hearing a woman's voice singing. She started walking towards the noise and soon caught the smell of soaked pine needles in the mud and noticed her eyes working in the dark, making out the shapes of tall trees all around her. A faint light ahead. The voice got louder and louder, and the light grew with the sound dancing on the tree trunks. She approached the end of the trees and the beginning of a clearing. She saw a column of fire, stretching upwards to the dark sky in the middle of the circle of trees. The fire poured upward from a stone, and a woman's figure stood next to the stone. The woman wore a dark cloak with sleeves rolled up to the shoulder, revealing her open wounds on her palms. The woman tilted her head towards Jessica and reached her hands out in welcoming. Jessica walked towards her and stopped her in front of the witch, who wrapped her bloody arms around Jessica and said, "It's okay, you're home now."
We're going to read some fiction now, historical fiction set in Russia around the time of middle of like World War I, that we're playing fast and loose with accuracy. It's not finished, and it's kind of long, so we'll see how far we get into it before time cuts me off, so let's go. Grandfather was going to be furious. Sasha dreaded even bringing them home with evidence of his crimes written in mud, snow, slush, and even a stray candy wrapper stuck to the once pristine, soft-soled black shoes. They were not brand new, but not worn out to the point of requiring replacement, though now they were ruined. Someone had started a fire, by accident or purposefully, and the urgency of the situation and the panic of the director had driven the rehearsing dancers out into the frigid, late Russian fall, still clad in dance shoes and light clothing, still dressed in sheens of sweat. Some jackets had been salvaged by a brave ballerina who'd come out of the smoking building with coats of fur and wool bundled to overflowing in slender, muscled arms. But she had brought no shoes. So Sasha walked home in ruined ballet shoes instead. They were ruined the moment he'd stepped outside anyway, and it was better to walk home in what little protection they offered than give himself over entirely to losing a toe or two, or even the whole foot of the remaining leg he had. The ballerina did have two legs, but the right leg, up to just above the midpoint of the thigh, was bewitched polished bronze. The prosthetic was almost cage-like, golden and hollow, the design of the leg a mesh of elegant, swirling design. Sasha had lost all but his pinky finger and the jagged diagonal lower half of his palm on that fateful day, replaced yet again by the cold bronze. He was happy for the prosthetics, particularly the functionality of them, but he woke each morning with an unshakable, quiet fear that he would look down, and that the bronze would have grown further into him, that it would begin slowly, surely devouring what remained of his flesh and bone. He trusted his grandmother's life-saving gift, and he feared losing part of his soul to it. He didn't understand it enough to know whether that was something to fear at all. He did understand enough to know that grandfather would be upset about the shoes, as well as the burning of the studio. Neither grandfather nor grandmother were truly related to Sasha by blood. Grandmother had found Sasha dying in the snow outside his family's destroyed little shack on one of her forays into the wilderness to reconnect, whatever that meant, and helped him. Grandfather had had little say in the matter. Grandmother ran the house, and it wouldn't exactly be the first time grandmother had brought home a broken stray kitten. Sasha didn't think grandfather disliked him, but he knew he unnerved him. Grandmother never bore children, and it had been odd, he suspected, to see the golden gilded child practicing pirouettes in the halls of the house. The two small, mismatched footsteps, the two dark brown eyes turning too gold in the sunshine, the too dark skin, and mop of unruly, curly, mousy blonde hair. He was most definitely not what he had suspected grandfather had imagined when he thought of a child running amok in his household. But grandfather supported his ballet career and tolerated his presence, and Sasha did not press for anything more. Grandmother did enough fussing for the both of them, really. Sasha's jacket had not been carried out of the flames by the ballerina, but thin woolen blankets had been procured by the sympathetic neighbors to the studio. Sasha was still freezing, clutching the blanket tighter around him uselessly as he walked through the snowy sidewalk toward home. Nearby, a few dirt-smudged faces of children dressed warmer than Sasha eyed him suspiciously from across the street, and he bit back a sigh. He was heading home to a warm hearth in what could definitely be called an opulent house. But he knew his current dress, the shoes not designed for outside wear, the thin blanket wrapped around him, the towels, and slightly damp hair peppered with snowflakes, made him look like he belonged hidden away in the slums, not meandering better-tended streets. He wondered, briefly, if they were right. Sasha did not remember much about his life before grandmother had rescued him. He remembered it was his foreign mother that he resembled most, could recall her face in hazy, fleeting memories, but he didn't recall his father. He remembered a home, a shack on the rural outskirts of a city, one that was nearly always cold, and he remembered he didn't mind it, but his mother was not suited for such things. Remembered the hearth should always be golden orange, and layers of ragged, dirty cloth and jackets, and sometimes blankets he and his mother were always wrapped up in. Sometimes he thought he remembered her voice, but he never remembered the words. Time flew when one was lost in the blood-soaked fragments of the memories he still had, and Sasha was soon setting his palm against the cool doorknob of the house. He glanced down at the mud and snow-caked shoes, the one flesh foot numb as the metal one with the chill, and tried to subdue the anxious slips his stomach was doing. He started to turn the doorknob when a voice spoke from behind him. "Feed me," it said, the voice low and neither particularly masculine nor feminine, all too regal, yet soft. Sasha jumped a bit, turning with absolutely no idea what to expect, only to lay his eyes on a dog. The dog was a bit of a stretch. The animal was simply huge, incredibly tall, with long legs and a deep chest. Their face was narrow and long, almost curved along the top, with dark but intense, intelligent eyes trained on Sasha and the fluffy, rose-shaped ears folded back. The dog lifted their lip a bit. Pretty face, but nothing behind there then. "Feed me." No one else was around. Just the curly-coated giant of a wolf's descendant standing ominously in the middle of the pathway up to the door. "Go on home. Shoot," Sasha said, the flip-flops his stomach was doing turning into a pit of dread for it to sink into. Either he was mad, or, well, no, he must be crazy. Magic may exist, but dogs didn't talk. The dog couldn't have looked more miffed if they did have a human face with which they could make expressions. "I do not have a home, nor food to fill my belly, which are both issues you are to rectify." Sasha frowned, leaning against the door and crossing his arms to stay warm. "I've seen some shit," Sasha waved his golden hand flippantly, "but never a talking dog." "Well, it is only the finest of purebreds that can speak to the finest of blood, idiot." The dog scoffed, their slender head angling arrogantly. "What do you mean? The Bordzula can speak, but only to those possessing the blood of royalty." Sasha didn't get a chance to utter his disbelief as the door opened up behind him and he nearly fell inside. "Shit language." Grandmother's voice was firm but amused. Her face fell, concern rippling across the wrinkles crisscrossing her face as she took in the state of her ward. We'll stop there.
Really good, Virginia. Everybody was so good tonight. This was so cool, and it's cool to hear so many people affiliated with Syncalo, either published in Syncalo or on the Syncalo staff, and they have a really strong staff, so thank you guys. I'm just going to read one poem. This features a character. His name is Stubbs, and he's a 10-year-old boy. Okay? It's called The Escape. Through the telescope, Stubbs saw Jupiter, bright prick of light piercing his eye, and then a few moons materialized, faint pearls in the plush black mouth of sky. Europa, he knew, was a moon, but also a girl kidnapped by a wicked man dressed like a white bull. How exposed Stubbs felt, how alone. The chilled night brittled his skin as he gazed at the huge planet, its bloody cyclops eye glaring back. And it was like the time the man in the maroon sedan pulled close and said, "Come on, get in, I'll give you a ride." And for a long, dizzy time, Stubbs stood stunned by adult authority, danger magnified. The man's cool blue stare and the rose tip of his cigarette tattooed Stubbs' eyes. In that moment, he knew the world contained vast evil. And so he ran, black backpack smacking his back over and over, and it felt like when Dad cracked him against the back of his head with no warning, no reason. Stubbs' brain pinballing inside his skull as he raced, leaping ditches, zigzagging between aspens and fences, arms pumping as he sprinted across open fields of farmland. When Dad struck, nothing to do but stay silent, black bruise like a little heart throbbing his scalp. Stubbs kept running, heart thumping faster, faster, thinking, "Fucker, fucker, fucker." Autumn smearing his teary eyes with green and crimson, lungs stinging, metal tang of blood in his mouth until he had the courage to look back. Nothing was chasing him. He slowed to a shuffle at the edge of a farm, past a gleaming brown horse who snorted and tossed her tail, and ebony cows ankle-deep in stinky mud. And then there it was, the massive brown bull, flicking its tail like a whip, its white and wicked horns twisted to exquisite tips, and it squared itself to glare at Stubbs, its enormous body vibrating with rage, black eyes leveled and glassy, just like Dad's after the whiskey. But this time, Stubbs did not run. He dropped to all fours, wild heart still racing, howling, snorting, stamping and pawing the ground, feeling the terrible horns breaking from his skull.
Yeah.
Amazing. We had one more guilt-tripped volunteer sign up to read for us tonight. I think it was Zach that got her, actually, not me. But before I introduce her, I just want to remind everyone, our next Helicon will be December 9th. So not the 4th Thursday this month because of, like, you know, Thanksgiving and stuff, but 2 weeks after that, okay? Second Thursday in December, December 9th. If you want to be kept up on that, you can follow our Facebook page. We're going to be at the Logan City Hall building, and it's their community room, I guess, is what it's called. But it's got a big open space. We're going to be hybrid. We're going to have Zoom. We're going to be catered. It's basically going to be like Helicon's Sweet 16 birthday party. Okay? And our beautiful Star and Mitch will be there with their poetry and guitars and emceeing, and it's going to be all open mic. So come back, except don't come here, come there, a month from now, December 9th. Follow us on Facebook. And to take us out tonight is Millie.
Thank you. This has been such an amazing Helicon. Really cool to see in bullpen from when we were in bullpen a long time ago. So this has been an awesome night. It's been one of my favorite Helicons in a while. So Star told me I should talk about my poems a little bit before I read them, which was good advice. So I'm going to read two poems that are sort of playing with some like fairy tale type. So the first one's called Sleeping Beauty, and after reading a lot of some of the earlier written versions of Sleeping Beauty, I was thinking about it as like a rape narrative, and specifically about like, you know, that how passive she literally is. And some of them she only wakes up after she's given birth, because the baby sucks on her finger and pulls out the poison splinter. Okay. Sleeping Beauty. I was in the garden, planting new babies, kissing the many wet, foreheads and testing soil. When my husband wandered off, he called us once while I slept inside. The babies had grown crunchy. I said, "You are husks of your former selves." I ordered more, cutting my favorites from catalogs, hiding their faces up. In the envelope, under my pillow, I slept while it rained for weeks under wet cardboard. The new babies grew green and tired. By the door, I held them, rubbing the grassy skulls over my eyes. And I'll read one more. So this one's a little more straightforward, but it's Girl Without Hands, which is also a fairy tale with a lot of variants. This one talks directly about sort of a couple of different variants. Okay. In this version, he didn't know. His daughter was sitting among the little apples when he traded the tree, its fruit, his daughter, to the devil. It is the devil who makes the poor father take the axe and axe off her 2 good hands. But the father knew the tree he traded was his daughter, too. In many places a tree was planted with a birth and flourished, or withered with its child. Someone here switched the fruit. Apple trees were planted with boys, pears with girls. Remember how the father, who is sometimes the brother, would have married her had she not had her hands cut and offered on a silver platter. Many believed a woman missing a part was not a whole and could not marry, because what is the idea of a virgin but a whole? The prince gives her golden hands. They are heavy and hard to keep warm. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.